everyone. Welcome back to another session of Study Abroad. I am Madhvi Kaur, your host for today's webinar. So today we are going to discuss about UK and Canada universities, the process of those universities, the top universities of UK and Canada. We are going to discuss about the entry requirement for bachelor's and master courses. We are going to discuss about what all the job opportunities are there in the country, post-study work rights, and how abroad will help you to make your dreams come true. And one more thing I would like to add here, of course, there are a lot of things comes to in students and parents' mind when their child plans to go to send their child for the higher studies. Example, what kind of a countries they are sending their child, what kind of a cultures they are, what kind of a culture they are having, and then value of the degree. So there are a lot of questions come to these student minds. And before going forward, let me welcome and introduce today's speaker, who is Mr. Veer Anand, who is the Associate Director of Study Abroad and who himself studied from UK University. He is a double master's. So, Mr. Veer, over to you.
Thank you so much, Madhvi, and a very good evening to all the participants who have joined us here. I'm going to be your guest speaker today, and we'll try and make the session as interactive as we can. So all your questions, please do put them in the chat. We'll try and take up as many as we can. And in case we are not able to address the question due to the paucity of time, we will be putting in a mail address. So please send your questions to those and our counselors will be in touch with you. Look forward to a very interactive and an informative webinar with all of you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Madhvi.
All right. So before going forward, the first question comes into our mind when we are planning to go for study abroad for our higher studies. What is the major difference in between Indian education system and the overseas education system? So how a person can differentiate the major difference, I would say.
Right. I'm actually glad you asked me this question. So I've got about 12 years of experience in the study abroad field. And this is normally the first question that most parents or students ask. What we need to understand is what differentiates the way information is taught and learned in India versus when you're going abroad for a higher education. Now, I think that the best summary of this would be how Gary Armstrong actually put it in one of his books of management. And he said the best way you can learn is through discussion and case studies. And this actually sums up beautifully the biggest difference in the education system. In the Indian education system, there's a lot of theoretical information that is being taught. The application and the practice is lacking. When you're trying to, or when you're going for study abroad, you are taught by discussions, you are taught by practice, and you're able to actually put that practice into learning. If I take my example, after school, I went abroad to the UK and I did my bachelor's. Now, as a student who was about 18 years old, my mindset was hard drive to memorize information and to vomit it out during the exam and be done with it. However, what I learned is that I'm not retaining that. Now, in terms of retention, you only get that when you're discussing, when you're having a case study. So for me, the most big difference was the practice and the practical side of how information and the education was being taught. Secondly, in India, there is some potential for research initiatives. However, when you're studying abroad, your ability to research is a lot more. You've got some of the biggest organizations in the world that have got incubation centers at universities. You will have better initiatives. So, just to put it into perspective, Microsoft has got 17 incubation centers at colleges in the UK. So Google has got about 23 in Canada. And what they do is they have got incubation experts who are sitting there. They see the kind of case studies and the practical examples that a student has worked on. If they like it, they might as well just come up with the student and say, hey, we like what you have done. Would you like to come and work for us? So in terms of research and in terms of the curriculum, it's a lot more. Now, one hindsight to this is that the first time you're going for your bachelor's or your master's, it all may seem new to you. But then again, once you take to it, you kind of learn that, this is a fun way. It's a more hands-on methodology to learn something new. And at the same time, you are able to retain it. And this also comes down to the curriculum that is being taught. It is more advanced. It is more up to date. Of course, you will have more exposure as well, because there will be students from different nationalities. You will not be restricted to a subset of people who have been doing something in the same way like you have in some Indian universities and colleges. Because it's a global atmosphere and you're competing with the best, you get motivated and you learn how others are doing. So it's a very good opportunity to put your learning into practice. And as I said, learning from discussion is what really sets it apart. Also, job opportunities and placements are a lot more when you are studying abroad, because most universities, as I spoke about the initiatives and the incubation centers, they will have a placement cell which would be inviting a number of companies to come, speak, and then look at the work or the research that's being done. And if you have a handshake, they're brilliant. So, these are some of the differences in the Indian education system and people who want to go abroad and study there. So in a nutshell, that is how I would break it up.
So just an add-on, because we are discussing the difference between Indian education system and the foreign education system. The next question comes into my mind, which can relate the first question. We are not going to discuss the career opportunities as of now, because that will be doing in a later stage. But what do you feel? Because you yourself, I think, stayed a long period of time in UK. So how you feel? What about the system in terms of work culture? So what is the difference in between even the work culture in between the Indian and the UK or Canada? So what exactly you wanted to discuss with our listeners, so it might can help them in a way that building a career is also most important part, and what is the big difference and what is the big challenge in terms of finding a job or whatever comes into your mind. Yeah.
Sure. So I think the first biggest difference you have would be a cultural side at the work atmosphere. It's a very flat organization. Now, this is something which was alien to me when I started to study. Here we have a tendency to address our professors as sir and ma'am. There it was on a first name no basis. So that took some time. Secondly, in terms of work opportunities, this is something which varies from person to person, from university to university, and the career path he or she may want to take. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, where do I want to go 5 years in the future? And then the course, the bachelor's or the master's I'm doing, how does that work as an accelerator for me to meet the career goal? That is something any student needs to be very particular and clear about. You need to ask yourself, my degree, how is that going to be a catalyst for me to meet my end goal of the job? Or if I want to get into research, I want to get into entrepreneurship, that's completely my call. But your degree is not an end to itself. Your degree is the catalyst or the accelerator that is going to put you on the right career path. And that is what you will be learning there. Now, in terms of placements, in terms of job prospects, there are two ways to look at it. Number one would be a very strong alumni network that you will have in the university where you're going. Leverage that alumni network. Many times, students who have passed out, and this is something which I've also done, you will be invited to the university, you will talk about your experience and how you found a job, and they'll help you in terms of, who are the right people to reach out to in the industry. Second would be the career placements that your university has as well. And third would be, once you actually get a job or you want to go into further research, The most important thing for you to understand is the style of working there. Now, with my background and experience, I can clearly say that the way most Indian companies or the way most international companies work is the same. The only difference would be that the structure is a lot flatter. They are a lot more open. It's not as formal as a hierarchy or the red tape that we might have. But then again, that is something which is beginning to change, and it's something specific from company to company. So in terms of finding a job, in terms of, making your way to the next step, please be in touch with your career placements of the university. Every university would have a placement cell. It's a part of the requirements for higher studies in the UK and in Canada. Research that, look at the class size, look at the ROI that you are getting, and then make an informed decision. Upgrad has an entire team of counselors who will help you with that. So if you're looking to do that, we'd be very happy to help you do that as well. There'll be a mail address flashed later in the chat and in the Q&A section. Please do send your queries to that. Again, at the end of the day, the onus comes onto the student. What is his or her long-term goals, 5 years and 10 years, and then making your way backwards from. That is how I would actually answer this question.
Thank you so much for this detailed answer, and I think this is gonna help our listeners a lot. So when we are talking about the country, the second questions come into my mind. That is, what all the few top universities of UK and Canada, and what do you feel like? I mean, how can you differentiate in between the UK or Canada's top ranked universities or a mediocre university? Because student is always like that, I wanted to apply for a top 5 or top 10 universities. So should we only focus on our top ranked universities, or we are open to apply for mediocre universities as well? So how to choose the university, which is the main question? Yes.
Right. So I'm going to answer this question in two parts. I'll first talk about the top ranking universities in UK and in Canada. And then I will talk about some of the courses also that are very popular and those that are gaining traction. And then second, I will talk about how you can select your university. So there are two ways that you actually do this. First, if I talk about the UK, if I look at the QS ranking, or I look at the Time ranking, or I look at the Masters Portal ranking, or the Economist ranking for that matter, UK has got a number of top 100 ranked universities in that. Now, how the ranking is actually broken up is a breakdown of factors such as the ROI, the employability, the curriculum, the cost, the research, faculty, and the scholarships. These are the main factors which decide the ranking. Now, if I'm talking about the UK, right? The UK has got the Russell Group. The Russell Group is a group of 24 universities in the UK. These are Cambridge, Oxford, Exeter, Warwick, UCL, Imperial, London School of Economics, so on and so forth. 24 university ranking would also mean all the colleges that are a part of that university. So in terms of your options, there would be quite a few that you would have. Secondly, if you were to leave aside just the Russell group of universities and you look at some of the other ones, you will also see that there are many universities which may not be in the Russell group, but they have got a very good ROI. Like you've got University of Reading, Henley School of Management, you've got Nottingham Trent, you've got many in Scotland, many based out of Ireland. Now, when you're selecting a university, the most important thing you need to look at is what is the budget. Second is what would be the employability, the class size, and what is that university famous for? What is the one thing that university has as a USP which the others do not have? You need to weigh in all these and then decide which is the right one to go. Now, in an ideal situation, depending on your marks and the entry requirements that a student or the university has, best thing would be like when you're doing a shortlist, look at 2 dream universities, look at 3 or 4 safe, and 2 where your chances of acceptance would be the highest. That is how I would actually make my list, and that is what I would recommend most of the participants in this webinar to also do that. Understand what are the entry requirements for some of the universities that you want to look at. Now, if I were to say what are the top universities in the UK, first thing that comes to my mind is University of Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, Edinburgh, Manchester, King's, LSE, Bristol, and Warwick. Apart from that, look at the other 14 in the Russell Group as well. Then there's a group known as your red brick universities, which have been there for a very long time. You've got University of Huddersfield, Saxlets, Cranfield, Durham, which you can also look at in the UK. Now, when you're looking at the UK universities, the first thing that comes to my mind is which are the popular courses there, right? In terms of the popular courses, what I would say is that business and management has traditionally been the major courses that students from India go to. This is followed by engineering, tech, and IT. Now, if I just look at the average number, business and management takes about 40 to 45% of total students. And then you've got engineering, tech, and IT, which takes about 20 to 25%. However, there are a number of specialist courses which have gained a lot of prominence in the past few months, past few years also, as a matter of fact, and more universities are starting to address it. Now, let's say that I'm looking at a very specialized field as engineering and tech, or I'm looking at IT. University of Cambridge, London Business School, UCL, Imperial, Edinburgh has actually got a specialization for people who are working with artificial intelligence and machine learning as part of computer sciences. Again, in terms of the curriculum, it is continuously evolving. Now, when I talk about business management, there are specialist courses in retail. There are specialist courses in online retail portfolio as well, which are now a part of an MA in marketing or an MSc in management, however you want to see that. So in terms of the universities, yes, there are snobbish brands, lack of a better word, who would be a part of the top 10. At the same time, their entry requirements would be very different. Most of them may want a GMAT. If you do not have a GMAT, then you need to look at those universities where the entry requirements are more relaxed. I'll talk about the entry requirements in the next few minutes. But right now, applying to not a top university or not a Russell Group university is a choice that depends on your budget, your scores, be it in your bachelor's or in school, depending on the course you want to do. And finally, what is the ROI and the class size that you're getting. Now, once I move to Canada, Canada has the equivalent of the Russell Group. It is called the U15. There are 15 top universities that they have there. Now, in terms of those 15 top universities, you will have a number of colleges and options that you can also look at over there. Now, if I were to leave aside the U15 and the Russell Group, in terms of the ranking, there will be universities that have the R1 and the R2 and the R3. This is based on the Carnegie Association of University ranking. As long as a university is an R1 and an R2, I would say that you'll get a very good return on your investment, and you can look at that. Now, when it comes to courses, Canada is very strong for IT, technology, and engineering as well. So what I would say is that, again, look at the entry requirements, look at the course you want to do. And coming back to the first question that I spoke about, you need to look at a university as a catalyst to your goals as a professional, not an end mean, beg your pardon, to itself. If you do that, you really cannot go wrong. So, that is how I'd like to sum up this answer.
Okay, so that was very much in detail, and I think people are so much satisfied after listening this answer. The only thing comes into my mind about Canada, because there are the colleges and the universities. Education, if I'll talk about the education system in Canada, so what do you feel and what do you think? Should people choose the university colleges or people can go with the universities only? So how will you, if you can just give a little short uh, description on that, that how they can relate both the things together, or it is important to study in the university only, or what do you feel that colleges are also equivalent?
So, first and foremost, what I would say is do your research. You've got universities, you've got standalone colleges. Look at the entry requirements. Now, there are many universities and colleges in Canada which accept 15 years of education. Some accept 16 years of education. So the most important thing for you to see is in which university or college do you qualify. Once you do that, look at the entry requirements also of that. Now, in an ideal situation, these would not exist, but we do not live in an ideal world. And that is why we need to look at the entry requirements. I would say basis your budget and what are the requirements of the university vis-a-vis the course that you want to do. That is how you should actually start. Now, in terms of the entry requirements, which would be the first step, right? If you're looking at an undergraduate or you're looking at a bachelor's course, in India, we have multiple boards. We've got the IB board, we've got the ICSE board, we've got the CBSE board, so on and so forth. You've also got the state board. So first would be to understand what board is it that you're coming from. If you're looking at the International Baccalaureate or the IB, or you're looking at the A levels, if you've got an AA or you've got an ABB between your subject specific, you may apply. In your international in terms of your International Baccalaureate or the IB, if you've got 34 to 38 points and usually a score of 7 to 5, you may apply, but there may be some specific requirements also. In terms of your bachelor's, if you're from the CBSE or from the ISC board, I would say an 80% would be a safe number that you should be looking at. In terms of a post-graduation, if you've got a merit or you've got a distinction, definitely. In terms of a percentage, I would say 60 to 65% is what you should be looking at. Then comes to the Indian standards of class 12, which are your state. This would be again an 80 to 95% is what I would say across all subjects, because the state board may not have the same weightage as compared to an IB or a CBSE or something else. Now, what happens is if you're looking specifically at an undergraduate course, be it a science or an engineering or a biosciences or an IT course, you would need at least a minimum of 80% is what I would recommend, so that you can also apply for a scholarship. Now, just to put it into perspective, Canada last year had $40 million in terms of scholarships that they gave out to Indian students, which is a lot. There are more than 300 scholarships that Indian students can look for. So my suggestion is that look at the requirements, look at what is the specific course you're doing, and then select between a college and a university. And this would be the same for the UK as well. Most requirements would be similar. However, in Canada, some universities and colleges look for 16 years as opposed to 15 years in the UK.
Thank you so much for your answer. I think we have covered quite a bit about entry requirements of UK and Canada, but still, if you can, because this question we are already discussing, so I just wanted to add a small thing. Can you just give a little bit of overview about GRE and GMAT? Is it mandatory, or without that, a person can apply for UK and Canada universities or colleges?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll be very happy to do that. So they are common entrance academic tests. These are for your undergraduation. They are the SAT, the ACT, and the AP. Now, UK universities typically do not ask for a SAT or for an ACT or for the AP. Canadian colleges many times would ask for a SAT, yes, so it would be beneficial so that your funnel size for universities that you want to apply to can be more. Now, when you're looking at a master's, one of the Russell Group universities or the U15 would in all likelihood want you to do a GMAT or the GRE for application. A GMAT is run by the GMAT, which is GMAC, and the GRE is run by the ETS. This is broken down between quantitative and verbal, and you'll also have integrated reasoning and analytical writing in the GMAT. GRE is very similar. GMAT is scored out of 800, your GRE is scored out of 340. If you have a GMAT, so typically a GMAT is used for management courses. A GRE is used for MS courses. However, many universities are now accepting the GRE as a synonym to the GMAT for a management course as well. Now, what you need to understand is that many colleges may not have a GMAT or a GRE as a mandatory requirement, subject to you having a lot of work experience or getting the GMAT waiver, but that is very rare. Most colleges which insist on a GMAT or a GRE would continue to do that. Now, if I'm looking at the Russell Group, or I'm looking at the U15, or I'm looking at a top 20, 30 college or university in the UK or in Canada, yes, a GMAT or a GRE would be very beneficial because it would be a part of your entry requirements. Having said that, there are a number of colleges and universities as well as B schools which do not need a GMAT or they do not need a GRE. However, at this point, it is imperative for me to put that there is an English proficiency test called the IELTS. IELTS is a mandate if you're going abroad for your study. For this, your IELTS rating needs to be, or your score needs to be at least a 6.5 across and a minimum of 6 in one subject. However, some universities are more strict. Now, when I talk about the IELTS, it is broken down between writing, reading, speaking, and listening. These are the 4 facets that any student would be involved in when they are studying abroad, right? Now, the English proficiency would be a must. No university would budge on that as a requirement. As a matter of fact, when you're applying to Canada, if you do not have an IELTS, say for a few, they won't even accept your application. In the UK, you may get a conditional offer subject to you having to send in your IELTS score. So again, my recommendation would be that please, please, please keep in mind that the IELTS is a must for both the UK and Canada, irrespective of what you want to study.
Okay. All right. So the next question is, I think some of the answers you have already covered, but we'd like to more about the famous courses of Canada and UK. So what all the major courses are there which students opt for and are actually famous, can give a good jobs and make a career? So what would you suggest in terms of good courses and popular courses of UK and Canada?
So if I were to say, we need to kind of look at what each country has traditionally been famous for. That would be the first step that I would say in that which courses are famous. The oldest universities in the UK would be Oxford or Cambridge, followed by, the likes of Imperial, Trinity in Dublin, University of Edinburgh. If I'm looking at a course in management, at a course in law, at a course in political sciences, these are what the UK has traditionally been famous for. If I look at the student mobility report, which was published by the KPMG last year, of the 150,000 students who went in 2019, almost 80,000 went for a political science or a management course. The rest of it was broken down between law, engineering, IT, medicine, and new age courses such as sports medicine, cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, so on and so forth, which is again a part of engineering and IT. So if I were to look at a management or a political sciences course, I would say the UK would be a very strong bet that you can be looking at. When I come to Canada, Canada for its management has also got a very strong background. You've got some of the best universities there. Now, I won't go into which are the main universities because I've already spoken about the U15. Yeah. Having said that, engineering, IT, computer sciences is what is becoming really popular in Canada. If you go to the study in Canada website, you see that there is a lot of emphasis on engineering, IT, and new fields of IT, be it cybersecurity, be it data analytics, be it C-suite, be it cognitive analysis, basically how you use data and how you relate it to, okay, as an analyst, as a data expert in data mining, there are a lot of new age, particular specialist courses and curriculum that is being built into the Canadian education system. So if I were to say which would be the popular courses, I would say in UK, management, economics, law, and political sciences, yes. Medicine as well. UK has traditionally been a center of incubation for startups in fintech and in healthcare. If I move to Canada, I would say a lot of emphasis on computer sciences, engineering, management as well, maybe not so much for political sciences. But then again, there's something which you need to keep at the back of your mind. Most masters in the UK would be 1 year. 99.9% master degrees in the UK would be 1 year. In Canada, there would be some universities which give 1 year, but a majority of them would be a 2 years masters. So this is something you need to consider in terms of the time, in terms of the effort, and in terms of the expenses that you would be spending. So apart from a tuition fee, you would also have a living expense fee. So you need to keep that at the back of your mind. If I were to talk about a ballpark number in terms of an undergraduate course in the UK would be about 12,000 to 18,000 pounds per year. For a master's, it would be anything from about 15,000 to 50,000, depending on where you're doing it from. And about 10,000 pounds would be your living expenses per year, depending on the course you're doing. Canada would be a little cheaper. Canada would be about 8 to 15,000 pounds per year for your undergraduate. Just your tuition fee, your living could be about 8 to 9,000 pounds. Though when you're applying for the visa, it is 10,000 pounds, which I'll talk to you later as part of the GCI. And in terms of your master's the study, it's almost similarly priced to the UK. The only difference is that you are paying in Canadian dollars what you're paying in pounds. So you end up spending more because as Indians, we are earning in rupees, right? So this is something which you need to take. I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I normally don't do this, but I've been getting a question in the chat, and this question is about biomedical sciences. Satyam has already asked me this question 3 times. So for biomedical sciences, yes, I would say the UK has got a lot of potential. You can actually look at the University of Edinburgh, you can look at Cranfield, you can also look at Durham, which has got a specialty in biosciences as well. So I hope that answers your question. Right, Madhavi.
That was really nice of you that you have answered this question. Thank you so much for your answer, V. And okay, so as we have already discussed about the entry requirement, you have already discussed about the financial matters, that what about, okay, can you just tell our crowd that what about the fees structure of UK and Canadian universities? What is the approximately fees and the living expenses which they need to be prepared with? Just a short answer.
Yeah. Sure. So if I talk about the UK, I've already spoken about how much your tuition fee would be.
Yeah.
Now the UK is broken down into cities and university towns, how I would like to put that. And the same is with the Canada as well. If I'm living in, let's say, London, I would end up spending anything between 1,000 to 1,200 pounds per month in terms of my living expenses, which would be my rental, my transport, my food. If I am in a university town, let's say I'm staying at the University of Reading, the whole town is to do with Reading and Henley Business School. In that case, my living expenses could be as low as 700 to 800 pounds. So I save about 400 or 500 pounds depending on where I live. Canada would be very similar. If I'm living in one of the major cities, yes, you end up paying a lot more. Again, what you pay in the UK in pounds, you will be paying pretty much that amount in Canadian dollars. If I'm staying up north at Nova Scotia, yes, my rental would be a lot lower. My food expenses would be lesser as well. And that would really depend. Now, if I'm staying at the halls of residence at a university accommodation, it would be significantly cheaper. If I'm staying at a private room or I'm sharing a flat, of course, then it depends on, what kind of life and what kind of expenses you're building for yourself. So again, your accommodation, the kind of lifestyle, if you want to lead a very lavish lifestyle as a student, it really comes down to how much you want to spend. But as a ballpark number, if you're staying in the city, about 1,000 Canadian dollars to 1,000 pounds would be a decent life you can live. If you're staying in a township or you're staying away from the main city at the halls of residence, you could maybe save a couple of £100 or dollars on your living expenses.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. So we have covered most of the things about both the countries. If we can discuss a little bit about the visa,
Sure.
visa requirements, or whatever things comes into your mind when a student needs to apply for a visa. Let's say he's on the final stage. What all things he or she, a student, needs to take care while applying for a visa, or anything which would you like to discuss with us?
Sure, absolutely. So when you're applying for a visa, I would say give yourself at least 3 months. Now, for UK, when you're applying for a visa, you can only apply 3 months before the start of the course. Canada is very similar. I would say get all your documents in check. That is the most important thing that you can do. Now, when you're applying for a visa, what is the most important thing the High Commission want to see is how genuine is your cause? Are your documents in order? So your bank statements for the past 6 months, your fixed deposit receipts, your mutual funds, your share demat accounts are some of the documents that you can submit with your application to show you've got financial solvency. Now, you need to keep in mind that for the UK student visa, your entire tuition fee, living expenses, and your maintenance expenses must be in a savings bank account in your name for a period of at least 1 month before you apply for the visa. Now, you can withdraw these funds, but then the lowest balance in that of the last 1 month will be counted towards your visa requirement. So you need to keep that at the back of your mind. In case the bank account is in your father's name, then you will need to show a birth certificate or an affidavit from your father or from your mom and dad to establish your financial capability. And you need to be sure that only nationalized banks would be accepted, or private banks, cooperative banks will not be accepted. Secondly, for Canada, students are normally advised to pay their housing and living costs in advance. This is something known as a GIC, which is a guaranteed investment certificate. It is 10,000 Canadian dollars. You can actually pay this to ICICI Bank of Canada, or you can pay it to Scotia Bank, or there are some more financial institutions on the website of the Canadian High Commission, which you can do that. Now, how it works is the bank, this money is sent to the bank, and you will get interest on that when you go back to Canada. This is the recommended process for all Canadian student applications which are applying under the SSP or the student partners the program. However, if you do not wish to send money in advance, you do not want to go on the SSP, then you need to show sufficient funds in your savings bank account when you apply for the visa. Now, in both cases, if you want to show an education loan for your funding proof, you are permitted to do that as well. But the loan needs to be from a nationalized or from a reputed bank. Normally, NBFCs are also accepted, but there may be some questions asked over there. Now, in most of the cases, when you're applying for the visa, you will need to have your IELTS score as well. For the UK, they will need the IELTS score. For Canada also, they will ask you for an IELTS score as well. Now, there is one difference. In the UK, before you can apply for your visa, you need to get something known as a CAS from the university. which is your confirmation acceptance that yes, I have confirmed, I've paid my tuition deposit, I have met all the requirements in the conditional offer. If it was a non-conditional offer, I've paid my security fee. Until you do not have your CAS number, you are not in a position to apply for the UK visa. Now, in terms of documents that you need when you're applying for the visa, you need to have your CAS number for the UK, yes, and for the Canada, it really helps if you have the GIC. Having said that, there are some things which you need to keep at the back of your mind. When you're applying for the UK, please ensure you have a valid passport. If my passport is expiring in any time during the duration of the degree, you will be asked to get a new passport, or your visa application may not be accepted. You need a proof of funds. You will need a CAS, which is a confirmation of acceptance for your studies. You will need all the documents that you have used for obtaining the CAS, the color photograph. Of course, this will be in the passport size. And for the UK as well as for Canada now, you will need a COVID test, shows that you are COVID negative. You will also need a test for tuberculosis, and you must have got both your vaccines when you're applying. So please keep that at the back of your mind. Now, in terms of the visa application fee for the UK, excuse me, it is about 27,000 rupees, plus you will have the insurance and the national health scheme, which also goes into that. Sorry, I just confirmed, it is 28,700, beg your pardon. And along with this, you'll need to pay your insurance and your national health scheme, to use the government healthcare system if you're not well. And for Canada, it is 7,500 rupees. So I hope that answers your question. Now, in terms of the documentation that you need for the UK student visa requirements, please keep in mind that this is in sync with the BFS documentation or the docket that you will be getting. It is a complete online process now. You apply everything. You only need to go to the BFS center for your biometrics. If any information is not complete, you will not be asked to come for that. So it's a check and balances system which you have there. In terms of the Canadian visa, there are just some more documents that you have. You will need an attested copy of your class 10, 12th, or your degree certificates if you're doing the master's, or if you're doing a bachelor's, just of your class 10 and class 12. Many times there will be an academic reference or an employer reference as well. If you are applying where the references requirement, you will also need to submit your SOP, which now they've started to ask. You will need to show certificates of all your extracurricular achievements, an acceptance letter from your education institution, your proof of funds, proof of financial funds, and of course, your English proficiency, which will also be needed. Moreover, your university would also make you aware of any additional requirements that you might have when you're applying for the visa. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you so much for this detailed answer. The next thing, as you have already explained about the visa requirements and the financial documents, you have given a detailed information about it, that I think all the questions of the listeners has already been clear now. What about let's say there is a student coming in upgrad to process all the applications and everything. So we are helping from the scratch, right? So that we're going to discuss in the last question, that how upgrad will help. Just cut short, I just wanted to mention, because the next question comes into the student minds. We are going to the university, we have chosen the right university, we have paid our tuition fees, we have applied for a visa, we got the visa, everything is going very fine. What about the after studies? What about the career growth? Why a student, because it's an Indian mindset. When you are applying for the international degree, we think that we're going to get a job in the country. So what about the career opportunities, and what about the job perspective, I mean, in the country, in both the countries?
Sure. So actually, right now, there is a post-study work visa, both for Canada as well as for UK. Let's start with the UK. Basically, candidates. So, as you know, UK, was the champions in terms of the Brexit, and they wanted to break away from Europe. So this has actually been a blessing in disguise for a number of students who want to go to UK as their country of higher education. So candidates who began their education in the autumn of 2020 or in spring 2021 will need to be in the UK on a student visa by September 27, 2021, which is already happened. Also, students who are going to start their studies next year would be eligible for this. Now, how it works is that if you are in the UK and you are doing a higher education course, which is for more than a year, you will be allowed to stay back in the UK for up to 2 years and stay back in the UK for up to 2 years with the minimum salary of £20,800. This would be a tier 2 sponsor license. For students who are doing a PhD, they can stay back in the UK for up to 3 years. Now, once you stay back in the UK for up to 2 years of doing your masters, you can continue to work and then change that from a PSWV to a skilled visa subset, which is tier 3 or a tier 5. This is something which your company that you're working in the UK would help you with. So in terms of the UK, PSWV of 2 years is pretty much a very good possibility and a chance, subject to you having a job of £20,800 and you doing your degree from a recognized higher institute, which is a part of the UK curriculum board setup. Now, when it comes to for the Canada, it is slightly different. Canada has got something known as the PGWP, which is your postgraduate work or your post-graduation work permit. This is normally issued for the length of the study program that you have. The maximum length of the post-work permit is of 3 years, which means that if your post-graduation course duration is of 2 years, then you get a 3-year PGWP visa. However, you need to keep in mind that for Canada, a post-graduation work permit cannot be longer than the student study program. Also, the course duration must be a minimum of 8 months in length. So if I'm going for a diploma or a certificate of 6 months, I will not be eligible for a PGWP in Canada. So this is a very brief intro onto the PGWP and the post-study work visa in Canada and in the UK. However, what actually works in your favor as a student going to UK and Canada is that as a student in UK, I can work for up to 20 hours a week. In Canada, I can also work up to 20 hours a week, subject to you meeting some requirements which you learn for at the university when you go there. You would normally get in the UK anything between 8 to 14 pounds per hour. In Canada, it would be about 8 to 12 Canadian dollars. Let's say that you do not have the bandwidth of giving it a full 20 hours, you even work 10 or 15 hours, you're still looking at about making 500 or 600 pounds, or 500 or 600 Canadian dollars, depending on where you are, which would actually help you to fund your education or to pay off for your living expenses. So I would definitely say explore all the opportunities. As a matter of fact, many colleges and universities, especially in Canada, would say that, okay, you can work in the library. Why don't you come and work at the cafeteria, help us in the book restocking. We pay you 12 to 14 Canadian dollars per hour. Use these opportunities. There'll be internships also. There'll also be companies picking you up for, intern projects, be it for your master's or be it for your bachelor's. Please explore these. All these opportunities exist. And this is why I said that if you can support yourself while you are studying, that's the best thing you can do. So in terms of a post-study work visa or a PGWP, options are there. 2 to 3 years, be it UK or Canada. And then, of course, you can also work alongside your degree. So the options exist.
I'm sorry, I muted myself, I suppose. Sorry for that. Okay, so I would not say that this is the last question, but I think we have covered almost everything. We have covered about the education system, we have covered about the tuition fees, requirements, financial documents, visa requirements. We have already discussed about the career opportunities in both the countries. So I think the major question can come into our listeners' mind, that is how upgrad can help us to all these process. Are we doing the applications for them, or are we doing the visa, or are we doing everything? So how
Sure.
upgrad will help about
Sure.
this?
So before getting that question, I'm just going to jump into the chat again. I'm seeing this question many times. What are the major scholarships for UK and for Canada? So I'll just quickly touch on that as well.
Yes.
For the UK, you have got the Commonwealth scholarship. You've got the British Chevening scholarship. You've got the Erasmus Mundus Joint Master's Degree Scholarship. You've got Rhodes, you've got Felix, you've got Hornby, you've got Charles Wallace. You've also got a Dr. Manmohan Singh Scholarship. So I would suggest that you please have a look at that. There is also state-specific scholarships like the Goa Education Trust scholarship, one set up for Delhi residents. At the same time, your university would also be giving you grants and bursaries. So please look at that. Most of the time when you are applying, in your application, you will have a tick box, which will say, do you wish to apply for a scholarship, and the names of the scholarships. I would say tick that and explore the opportunities. For Canada, there are more than 290 plus scholarships that come on the top of my mind. These are Canadian government scholarships. They are non-government scholarships. These are institutional scholarships as well. You've got the Banting postdoctoral fellowship, which is very big in Canada. You've got the Novenia, you've got the IDRC, you've got the Canadian Studies, Ontario Trillium. Then you've got the ASEAN scholarship. You've got scholarships based on the province. You've got the Quebec scholarship. You've got Nova Scotia. You've got the ecological scholarship. You've also got one set up by the Prime Minister of Canada, which is the Justin Trudeau Scholarship and Fellowship. So please explore all these scholarships. At the end of the day, a rupee saved is a rupee earned. So if you're getting a scholarship, I would explore it. Now, coming back to the question that Madhvi just asked me, how does upgrad actually fit into your entire strata of things? So upgrad is, as you all know, one of the leaders in education in the country. We are a unicorn as well. Now, when it comes to your study abroad needs, we will be giving you end-to-end servicing and facilities for all your study abroad needs, be it your bachelor's or be it your master's. The first thing that a student wants to do is kind of understand, is my profile the right profile for me to go abroad? We will help you with your profiling, help you to understand what are your aspirations, look at your CV, look at your resume, tell you that basis what you've already done, what would be the best way forward. We are not trying to sell you or make you go for a degree. We are trying to be your thinking partner to understand what is your aspiration and helping you meet that. Again, an education is a means to a better life. It is not an end to itself. So that is what we stand by and the team here looks at. We'll help you with your profiling. This will be followed by creating a shortlist for you. So our counselors will be in touch. We'll try and understand which would be the colleges where your chances of acceptance would be the highest, where you can get an application fee waiver, where you may get a scholarship, and we will send you an entire shortlist. Then we will be in touch with you to weigh the pros and the cons of each university, college, or the degree that we have put in the shortlist. Once that is finalized between the counselor and the prospective student, then after that, we come on to the editing stage. Now, some colleges would ask for an SOP, some of them would ask for an LOR. We will review your SOP or the LOR that you'll be getting from your academic reference or from your professional reference. We will go through it in detail, tell you how you can make changes, come up with sample SOPs, flesh it out for you, and help you with the entire application. Once we are done with the application, we will chase up for you on the university as to what is the status. Are there any more documents? Are you getting a conditional offer? Are you getting an unconditional offer? If it's a conditional offer, why have you got any backlogs? We'll give you that information so that your entire journey for your study abroad can be staked out. After that, once you have your offer letter, we will also tell you how to go about it next. You pay your tuition deposit, you give a confirmation, we will handhold you through that. And then finally, we'll also help you with the visa process in terms of getting all your documents in order, in terms of saying which would be the right visa category you'd be looking at for Canada, for the UK, other countries that we are doing as well. We will handhold you. So in terms of how we will help you is that we will not be working as a counselor to you. We'll be thinking of us as your hand-holding buddy, of your thinking partner to, complete your entire study abroad journey and your goal. And that is what we bring onto the table. Again, this is a seamless process that is completely in-house, and my team and I will do our best to make sure that this is sorted out as quickly and on priority for all students who are coming to us for help for study abroad. So that's how I would say in a nutshell is we can help you.
All right, thank you so much. I think we have covered almost everything in our session today. Just last thing comes into my mind, that you, as you yourself studied from UK University, and you are the alumni of LSE as well. Can you just give us a little bit about your experience to our crowd? How was your experience in UK? What kind of a, not in terms of the career growth, not in terms of the university, but just overall, what is the living style of UK? Did you enjoy your time enjoyed your time in UK? So we just wanted to know that.
Sure. So I went to the UK right after my schooling, and I was there for about 9.5 years, and I came back to India in the later part of 2010. So it was a bittersweet experience. You miss your family as well, because as Indians, we are very attached. We lead a very sheltered lifestyle. Family values and the relationships we have speak a lot. Having said that, the UK as well as Canada, there is not so much of a joint family setup, unless, of course, you are the queen, in which case, yes, you live in Buckingham Palace, but otherwise, it's more nuclear families. Students or people, they have a very straight vision what they want to do. And that depends a lot from the upbringing that they've had. Again, as I said, that for us, a family is a big thing. For them, family may not be the big thing. It is the individual versus the self. So that took a bit of time for me to kind of absorb and assimilate. Having said that, once you kind of go past that, you see life is pretty much the same. Wherever you may be in India, you may be in UK, you may be in Canada, you may be in Australia. At the end of the day, if you're good at what you do and you're doing the right thing, I think that is the most important thing. If you've got conviction in your degree, and you're working hard to meet your assignment deadlines, you're actually studying, it's the same as anywhere else. Now, there may be some distractions in terms of a different lifestyle, in terms of more creature comforts, in terms of people being more friendly. But that is something which, varies from person to person, from individual to individual. So it wasn't that much of a cultural shock for me. It was more to do with kind of settling in. And in the first 1 month, once you've settled in, once you find your feet, it is pretty much the same. If I take the example of students coming from cities, going into bigger cities for the graduation or the master's, it's the same thing. It's just that here you are moving across a continent, across a country. The experience is really the same. And at the end of the day, what I would tell every prospective student is that your education is something which stays with you for life. Education is the biggest investment you can make for yourself. And UpGrad, we will help you make that investment for a better cause. So that is how I would like to conclude on saying that how UpGrad helps you. Again, we'll be your thinking partner and we will handhold you, especially for all your study abroad journey. And again, education is an investment. It's a catalyst for you to be a better person, to be a better professional, to be a better human being. And once we accept that, I think everything else falls into place. So on that note, I would like to, thank Madhvi for being such a phenomenal host, and thank you for all the questions that all other participants got. I apologize if I've not been able to answer any question. Madhvi would be available along with her team for all questions that you might have. Ram, who has been our moderator on the chat, will be giving his mail address along with Madhvi's. Please reach out to the team for any questions you might have. And I can assure you, our counselors will be in touch with you very soon to help you with all your questions and all your queries for your study abroad journey. So on that note, Madhvi, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Veer, for such a lovely session. And thank you so much for giving us the time and explain everything to our listeners. I hope they will be having a clear picture now about the UK and Canada's education system, about the universities and other things. So, all right. So, guys, if you have anything left, if I know that all the questions are not solved, but we are here to help you out. If anything is there, you can just reach us, and we'll be there to help you out for your entire process, right?
So, so just on that note, under the chat, you've got Madhvi's mail ID, which is madhvi.virdi@upgrad.com. I'm just going to send that to everyone as well. And please do send in all your questions, all your queries for your study abroad journey to us, and our counselors, at the cost of repeating myself, would be there to handhold you and to make this journey a success. So on that note, thank you very much, Madhvi. Thank you, Ram.
Thanks for this add-on.
Thank you so much. And to all our participants, you've been brilliant. Your questions would be answered and we will get in touch with you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for your time. And I hope to see you soon in our next session. Thank you so much. Thank you.